The Canadian disability rights movement was sparked by events in the United States. The Canadian disability rights or independent living movement was born in Winnipeg when disabled people were protesting the lack of inclusion of disabled people in an international conference called Rehabilitation International in 1980. At the time, organizers spoke of the U.S. experience and said, "This is what we want." Independent living at the national level was formed in 1986. There are now 28 independent living resource centers across Canada. Independent living has 4 key principles. 1. That they be consumer or disability controlled. 2. That they serve across the disability community. 3. That they be community-based and non-for-profit. And 4. That they promote the full integration and participation of disabled people. Notable members of the disability rights movement in Canada include Henry Enns, who is a member of the Manitoba League of Physically Handicapped, an organization that promotes equal rights, full participation, and positive change through advocacy and public education for disabled people. Enns also started an international organization called Disabled Peoples International, which is focused on attaining and sustaining the rights of full participation and equality for disabled persons worldwide. Al Simpson was a supporter of Henry Enns' plans to start Disabled Peoples International. He was also a board member of the organization. A fierce advocate in his own right, Al was a founding member of the Manitoba League of the Physically Handicapped, the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, 1010 Sinclair Housing Incorporated, and the Canadian Association of Independent Living Centres. His advocacy led to improvements in housing, support services, and in public transportation. He was also involved in ensuring that the rights of Canadians with disabilities were included in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Jim Dirksen, another notable disabled Canadian activist and member of many of the organizations I've already mentioned, worked tirelessly to get disabled people recognized in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. As the story goes, Jim followed then Minister of Justice Jean Chrétien into a washroom to lobby for the inclusion of physical and mental disabilities in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Today, you can find both in Section 15 of the Charter. The Charter was an important piece of legislation for many people in Canada, including disabled people. In 1982, it was signed, and disabled people became a protected group under Canadian law. Many of the stories we've shared, and others we haven't, have been preserved in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. Opened in 2014 in Winnipeg, the museum has a large section devoted to the disability rights movement in Canada. Other notable Canadian achievements in the disability rights movement include the passing of the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or AODA, in 2005. This provincial law aims to make Ontario accessible by 2025. The Act has 5 standards listed on the screen, and new ones are being developed each year, including one on healthcare and the other on education. In 2019, Bill C-81 was passed. This bill is known as the Accessible Canada Act and is meant to identify, remove, and prevent accessibility barriers in areas under federal control. Finally, alongside the work of activists in the field, there has been ongoing research, writing, and teaching happening at many major universities and colleges across the country. These academics and activists work with and alongside disabled people in the community to make Canada a better place for everyone. Listed on the screen are some of the national organizations that support this work. NEEDS, the National Education Association for Disabled Students; CDSA, the Canadian Disability Studies Association; IL Canada, Independent Living Canada; EVIANCE, formerly CCDS, the Canadian Centre on Disability Studies; and CCD, the Council of Canadians with Disabilities.